Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge, and welcome to Keeping Relevant. One of the things I want to talk about today is housing, and in particular, housing for those who don't have any. And who better to do that with than with Christine Quinn. She's the president and CEO of WIN, the largest provider of family shelter and supportive housing in the city, and a former colleague and old friend. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
The first job I remember, you were a housing advocate who would testify before the city council.
Absolutely. And, stand on the steps and harangue people like you and Steve Brienza and other council members.
And then who would think that you would land up being speaker?
I know. No, certainly not me.
Anyway, it was good. It was a good trip.
It was a very good trip.
And you learned a lot.
I did. I learned a lot from people like you. I learned a lot from the tenants and the housing folks that I was working with. Learned a lot about why you have to advocate and how to advocate.
And then you learned a lot about government and
Yep.
how it works.
Yep. And when
it works.
Right,
And when it doesn't, right?
Exactly.
And what kind of policies and what we have to do to really develop policies that are going to answer the problems that we're trying to address.
And I think what you just said, answer the problems, is one of the biggest problems in government, is that we are not actually trying to answer the problems. We're not trying to solve them. We're just trying to manage them off the cover of the New York Post.
Exactly. That's why we have such a mess.
That's right.
We have no goals. I mean, we have no concept of even wanting a policy.
Right. And you hear people say sometimes, well, if we say we're going to reduce homelessness by X or we're going to reduce hunger by Y, if we don't do it, we'll get criticized. Well, that's not a good reason. You have to strive for things that are big and bold. And if you don't make it, I actually think the New Yorkers will understand.
Right. How could we be a city in a country that allows this to happen?
No, I don't, the idea that the mayor has said, I'm going to start giving out tents so people can live on the streets is, just beyond me. And the mayor now, with the support of the governor, they are attacking and trying to erase the 4-decade-long right to shelter in this city. The right to shelter requires that the homeless be housed. They think that's the problem. But look at places like San Francisco and Los Angeles. They don't have the right to shelter, and everyone says that they are disasters because there are people all over the street. It's just only going to make things worse, and they're attacking that as the problem, as opposed to the challenges of poverty and high housing prices that are the problem.
And no housing policy.
And no housing policy.
I mean, we hear that, this administration is going to develop, 500 units of... But they don't.
No, I mean, things are certainly not happening at a rate we need them to happen. Even things like, processing contracts for shelters and hotels, it just doesn't happen. And, the governor tried to do some good housing stuff last year. She didn't get it through. I hope she comes back this year also pushing for housing policies that'll help across the state.
Giving somebody a tent that's cold.
Yeah.
I mean, I read just today, I think, that the residents who are now out at, is it Floyd Bennett Field?
Floyd Bennett Field.
They're freezing.
And the people who are at Floyd Bennett Field, many of them are families with children. Now, they are in these cubbies where the walls don't even go to the ceiling, and you have to go outside to get to the building where the showers are. That isn't safe for children. It isn't appropriate. And I think the mayor believes that if you treat these asylum seekers badly, they will leave.
They'll disappear.
Yeah, but that's, A, it's totally illogical, and B, no way to base a humane policy.
I live down the block from a hotel that's been taken over for families, people with children. Are they really being put out after?
Well, it's on hold. So the mayor had a plan to say every 60 days, homeless families with children have to go back to intake and be determined whether or not you get another placement. Now, it's temporarily on hold, largely because of the really good advocacy of Michael Mulgrew and the UFT around they're going to have to change schools all the time. But we don't know. The mayor may go back to that idea. And that idea, in a word, is harassment. Because if you are an asylum seeker living in a shelter, you have nowhere else to go. So making you pack up all your belongings, maybe switch schools, go down to St. Bridget's, God knows how long you're going to have to wait. You're going to get harassed by these workers who are going to try to, who are being judged by how many people they deter. And then you're just going to end up in a different hotel.
Now, the governor announced yesterday that the state is going to finance apartment owners to redo their apartments for SROs, single room occupancy.
Right.
That was one of the major problems that I faced in 1970 when I was working in the Lindsay administration.
Yeah.
I mean, what are they talking? First of all, SROs were not bad things if they were run well.
Right.
And actually, they're the model for group homes.
Right.
See, so, and in the old-fashioned days, you'd have an SRO where people would be, the owner might even supply food at dinner at night. But you had your own room, you shared a bathroom, and that was a very good thing. Yeah. But it was urban renewal, really, that I think cleared a lot of those SROs, at least where I was living.
And gentrification.
Yeah. Right. The Greenwich Hotel, which is one of the most notorious down in the Village, is now a luxury condo.
Yep. I don't know much about the governor's plan. I think it raises questions about, will there be social services connected?
Exactly.
In these new...
this is the model for group homes.
Right.
So that's a good idea. Let's do it. But let's see that it's an idea. It's a plan.
Exactly.
And it should be a part of another plan.
Right.
How do we develop a comprehensive housing plan?
Well, I think we need to be talking about it. We need to be pushing the elected officials. And I think that's really a place where the city council and the state legislature need to step in, and the borough presidents too, for that matter, step in and really say they need city or statewide plans. And I say statewide because there are, I was talking to somebody from the administration recently, and she knew of like 27 apartments in Buffalo. Now, it's hard to convince an asylum seeker to go to Buffalo, but not impossible. But you need to have it as part of something so that they know when they get to Buffalo, they're not just dropped there, that there's actually support.
And a follow-up.
Exactly.
And everybody is not in need of services.
No, but those who are need to get it. And one of the things I've long been pushing for unsuccessfully is that we develop and embrace an aftercare model so that the 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever it needs to be, months out of shelter, we're checking in on people. Because these are folks who may, if you're a domestic violence survivor, you may have gone from your mother's home to the batterer's home. He may never have let you use a checkbook. Then you're in the shelter. You don't have to pay for anything. And now all of a sudden you're in an apartment with a whole bunch of bills. Right. Why aren't we checking in, doing financial literacy, doing domestic violence counseling, whatever is needed, so people don't return to shelter?
If we get if somebody gets a voucher here, does it last for how long?
It lasts about 90 days. And the city's voucher unit that processes them is so dysfunctional. That 90-day, often people's voucher will expire and then they have to reapply. And the situation is so dysfunctional. I was at a meeting recently with the city, a bunch of people were there, including the Real Estate Board of New York, and every homeless advocate totally agreed with everything the Real Estate Board was saying about the problems for their landlords and for their brokers. That's when something's really messed up.
Right. And what I wanted to also say at the time of the money for the SRO conversions, what about the buildings department? Who talks to them about the procedures that owners have to go through? So
one of the things that was brought up during the Adams transition was, so you have the deputy mayor for social services. Department of Homeless Services is under her purview. But then there's the deputy mayor for operations who has HPD and the Department of Buildings. Doesn't really make any sense. If you need housing to end homelessness, why aren't they under the same deputy mayor? And viewers might think, how much difference does it make? It actually does in government. Those kind of lanes are really strict, and it really prevents comprehensive thinking.
Right, it's totally. When was the last time there was a comprehensive plan? Was it in the Lindsay administration?
Well, Ed Koch had that 10-year housing plan. So I'd probably say it was the Koch 10-year housing plan.
Right. Let's talk about WIN a little bit.
Yes.
It was originally started and called Women in Need.
Correct. It was started in Times Square about 40 years ago. Rita Zimmer, our founder, took 4 families into a church basement at St. Mary's, and then it's grown since then. We unfortunately...
When she took 4 families, were they living on the street? Oh, really?
Yeah, and we now, I say unfortunately because you'd like to not need to, but we have 14 shelters. We just opened one on Staten Island, so we're in every borough, and we have 5 congregate supportive housing buildings and about 200 supportive housing scattered site apartments.
And what kind of services do you offer?
So we really believe that the money we get from the city for our contract is the floor, because it's only for the head of household, usually the mother. So all of the things for the children, like after school, like a STEAM-based camp, like recreation, that's all additional. So we see the ceiling as the needs of our clients. The middle is what we call the way to win, which is our wraparound, holistic, trauma-informed care model that really works with everyone in the family and with the family, as a unit. We raise private money to have those additional services. Our best program, which I wish every shelter could have, is income building, our job placement and job recruitment unit. And they last year raised the hourly salary on average of someone who lived at WIN and was working by $4. Because leaving shelter with a job isn't the point. Leaving shelter with a job where you can pay the rent is the point. About 30% of moms come to us working, but they're getting evicted because they're working in fast food, minimum wage jobs. So we really focus on those who are work able, getting them to a better point.
And is there a time limit on?
No.
No.
No. Our average length of stay is 11 months. It went down from 15 months, last year, and we're usually around that.
And are you helping them find permanent?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we have staff that are housing coordinators. We joke around and call them our real estate agents, but they know all the landlords in the area around the shelters and throughout the city, and we work on placement. We recently got a challenge from the Robin Hood Foundation to do better in housing placement. So
we say a challenge.
They said, we'll give you money if you'll improve your housing placements even further. And we created a housing manager position, and it has made all the difference. A higher level person in the department. It's really, so last year, of the people we had placed in housing a year before, 91% of them were still not returned to shelter. So,
and they were decent, it was decent housing.
Oh, you have to go through an inspection by the city, which is appropriate, which is correct. And yeah, they're decent housing.
So, and then you have some that's permanent housing?
We do. We have supportive housing. So we have 5 congregate buildings. We're building a 6th one in the Bronx, and they're permanent housing with services on site. Depending on the nature of the residence, it might be a substance misuse counselor. It might be a psychiatric nurse who can give you your medicine, case managers, et cetera. I went to this meeting, you would have loved this meeting, in the Bronx once, a tenant meeting of all of our building. And we started talking about other issues, and we started talking about incarcerated women, formerly incarcerated women. And there was a woman who had been incarcerated, and there was a woman who was a retired corrections officer. And the two of them left the meeting with plans to go to the Women's Prison Association meeting like the next night or something, which was great.
Oh, that's so encouraging.
Yeah.
Right. Do you recruit the women? I mean,
no. So you go, if you're a homeless person.
Suppose you're incarcerated and you're leaving.
So I don't actually know what the process is with corrections, but in theory, there's case managers in the prison, and you go through a paperwork process. You have to meet the criteria for that particular housing development, which means homeless and then another thing. Maybe you're a domestic violence survivor, maybe substance abuse, maybe mental health, maybe a young woman who's aged out of foster care but has a baby, and then go through the paperwork process. And then basically, anyone who meets the criteria of the building will take up until the building's full.
So to get into one of your programs, you, as the person who's looking for housing, has to initiate the process?
So for the shelter part, you get sent to us through the city's intake. And then we take anyone we get sent, and that's how that works. You have to be living in the building and having been sent by the city's intake, which is called PATH. For supportive housing, you usually get referred by another program, or we may refer people ourselves, as long as they meet the criteria.
How do you work with your, I don't want to call them competitors.
I call them sister organizations.
Sister organizations.
You know, actually, everybody works really well together in a lot of different coalitions. And I've never really seen, you know, competitiveness or anything like that. Unfortunately, there's more than enough work to go around.
How do you differ from HELP?
Well, we only do families.
They do individual.
And they do individual. And there's nothing wrong with doing both. We just feel like we have a niche, a really good niche, and we want to be experts in that area.
So, does anybody relate? I mean, can a family live in your housing for years so the kids can grow up?
So usually the families that stay for years, and I met a family once that was with us for 6 years, are undocumented. Because you can't get into NYCHA, and you can't get a housing voucher if you're undocumented. And you can't work on the books if you're undocumented. So the ability to find an apartment you can afford is non-existent. So recently the mayor took a good step and is using some state money he got to give vouchers to these long-term stayers who are undocumented.
So somebody being evicted from a hotel where they've been living?
They probably won't get sent to us. We have 270 families that are asylum seekers, 700 children. We got those families in the beginning. I don't think they're going to send us any more because once you're if you're living in a DHS facility, they can't do the 60-day rule on you. So I don't think we'll get any more, though we have said we will run a hotel. We've seen a hotel. We're now in ridiculously endless contract negotiations.
And that's with the Office of Contracts?
We're still with Department of Homeless Services. Then we'll go to the Office of Contracts. Then we'll go to the Comptroller.
So how does your experience in government affect your performance as running a nonprofit?
So one of the things I realized when I got to WIN 8 years ago was people were, you know, advocates and people who advocate for the homeless are not always treated so well and often get the bottom of the barrel. And people were just kind of taking it. And I was like, no. We're going to call this one. We're going to call that one. I'm going to call the commissioner. Even just, you know, just today I got a text, thanks, your call made a difference from one of the staff. So I realized that because I had told the board when they hired me, I wanted to build an advocacy unit, but I had to start internally to get the staff to know that they were advocates.
To understand it.
And that that if I had nothing else, I had a big Rolodex. Of course, like 3 of them were like, what's a Rolodex? And I was big Rolodex, and I wanted to use it. There was no point in having connections if you couldn't use them.
Right. So you really became a school for, you educated and developed a political force.
Yeah.
So it reinforced, I mean, it took your knowledge of government and politics.
Yeah.
How did you get interested in politics?
So, well, 2 reasons. One, my mother, before she had my sister, was a social worker for Catholic Charities in the city. My father was an electrical engineer, but really he would have said he was a shop steward in his union. So that created kind of a sensibility. And then in my elementary school in the library, there was a little rack, a black metal rack of biographies. And I read them till they were dog-eared about, you know, your friend RFK and JFK and, you know, Martin Luther King and Gandhi. And I was just sold. That was all I wanted to do.
Change the world.
Right, go out and change the world.
How many of your employees believe they can change the world today?
I think a lot.
That you do?
Yeah.
Because I have the feeling that a lot of people feel they can't change the world.
You know, we just had our maintenance department of their own initiative take on repainting in a fun way all the shelters because they wanted to make it happier for their colleagues and they wanted to make it happier and brighter for the homeless families. Now, that's changing their world. They realized they had the power as maintenance workers and skilled painters to change their world, and they did. And I have to tell you, I was at one of the shelters on Saturday, which I hadn't been to since the initiative, and it was great.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I think that that's a problem these days, that people feel they can't.
Right.
They're not going to be able to change the world.
But I have to remind people, like, no. Somebody tells you it's a month? No. You call me and I call them. I have to remember, well, we don't want to bother everybody. I was like, no, what you want to do is bother people.
So we now have a government that has how many deputy mayors? I have
A
no
lot.
idea.
I have to count them, yeah.
How would you organize a city government that would be more, I mean,
Right.
almost introspective, I guess, right?
Well, I would put housing and homelessness under the same deputy mayor.
Yeah.
I think that's a big mistake. I would also, if we were starting on day one, we wouldn't have all these different agencies that deal with education and children. We'd probably have one bigger agency. So I would make sure that all of the agencies that dealt significantly with children were under one deputy mayor.
We have, so you would really reorganize it
Yeah.
back into larger agencies.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a model, in the Lindsay.
I know.
But we worry so about incarceration and children, and we talk about the pipeline.
Right.
I mean, don't people understand also that part of that comes from, there's a woman on my corner who sits on the sidewalk with her son, who must be, I don't know, 6 years old. I mean,
The biggest factor as it relates to becoming a homeless adult is being a homeless child.
yeah.
Which is why
Terrible.
driving the length of stay in shelter down is so important, because if you're 5 or 6, the difference of 4 months or 5 months is a lot in your very brief lifetime. So we really want to drive that down. We also need to remember that when these children go to school, they're bullied, they're picked on for being homeless kids. That's why it's so important to support shelters so they can have programs for the children on site, because when they come back to the shelter, we need them to be in community with their fellow children.
That's so important.
Yeah.
I read a story about you and I guess your political ambitions or something. But what astonished me in that story was the fact that they were commenting on the fact that your being an advocate for homeless would really affect your reputation with voters. I mean, is that what you think?
No.
Is this in the city?
I mean, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all, because I believe people want to help each other. We did a poll a couple of years ago at Quinn, and it showed that 60% of New Yorkers thought we needed to do more for the homeless. And a very high percentage were okay with having a shelter in their neighborhood. Always is going to get covered is, the bombastic person or the neighborhood, picket. That's always going to get covered. But that's not really where it's at. And I think voters like to see leaders. They like to see people who take risks because they're the right thing to do. And deep in their heart, they don't want to see children living on the street. So I'm not doing this to win votes, but I'm very comfortable that if I do run for office again someday, I'm not losing votes because of having done this.
Right. It's an amazing factor that everything has been, I mean, nowadays, it's all blamed on something. It's not real. There's no reality to it, and it's not ruining the city.
I saw, this was maybe 10 years ago, Bill Clinton was at, I think the group is called Northside. They're a great children's group, if I have their name right. Anyway, he said that the unfortunate thing in America is that everybody wants to blame and hold somebody accountable, even though that's not always the way it is in real life, And he said, I guess he was talking about immigrant issues. He said, you look now, everybody wants to blame the immigrant for what happened, but that's not true.
Right. And to think of the courage and the struggle that these people have gone through.
I can't imagine. I mean, they walked through raging rivers to get somewhere better. And if we can't honor that, who are we?
Exactly. So we've lost it in a way. We have the possibility, not only with a grand statement that we're losing democracy, but we're losing our souls.
I think some of our leaders are. I don't necessarily believe that the general population is.
Right. I hope so. So you're able to raise money for your...
Yes. because I'm,
You talked about your drives and everything.
Yep.
And it's not any more of a problem now than it was
No,
2 years ago, 4 years ago.
tragically, it's still a problem.
Yeah, I don't mean the homelessness, but I mean raising the money.
Yeah, no, raising money. I mean,
The
it's about the same.
generosity.
Yeah, people, no, people give. People give. It's. I'm not always surprised. I guess I'm always re-heartened by it. Not that that's a word, because people give. People who have no need to give, right? Who
Right.
have, real estate folks
Right.
who have no,
Right.
and it's a great thing.
Right. And it also makes you feel good about
Absolutely.
what you're doing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have no regrets about going to win.
Oh no, it's been great. I have learned so much. I've met so many great people. I feel we've really changed the face of advocacy for homelessness in this city. I'm very proud and happy.
I'm delighted.
Thank you.
And we've come to the end of this program, so we have to figure what we're going to do. We need a plan,
Yep, I will follow up with you,
a
Ronnie.
general plan.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Chris Quinn.